Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today I'm going to do something very different. I'm going to do a kind of open-ended discussion video about the latest dev Q&A, which was done a couple of days ago, and I'll be talking mainly about some of the points that Ian mentioned. They were talking about tank balance, healer balance. This video overall, I mean, it has not been received that well, as you can see the likes and dislikes, but I mean, there's a lot of hatred that's been towards BfA, and I don't fully understand every negative aspect about BfA because I've been enjoying BfA overall, but I can see where people are coming from. A lot of questions were aimed at Azeroth gear, things like reforging, where, I mean, some of the answers about reforging, like this kind of fun tax being applied that you have to play this specific role, then you have to pay for respecs. I mean, I feel that it's not the best way to do it, but this video is not about that. This video is all about what Ian said about tank and healer balance. So in the video, Ian mentioned that the tank balance, there was a question about tanks, that Bloody Case and Brewmasters are kind of dominant, and it's really, well, it's true. There's a lot of representation. There's been Reddit posts made about the tank representation in Mythic Uldir, where you can see Bloody Case and Brewmasters being extremely popular, to an extent that every other tank is kind of like, you know, especially when we talk about Guardian Druids and Protection Warriors, because Guardians and Protections are probably the least common in Mythic Uldir, least common in Mythic Plus, in High Mythic Plus. So I understand they're probably going to be nerfed. Something's going to be done about that. First of all, Brewmasters, one of the reasons why Brewmasters is so strong is to do with the fact that stagger mechanic by itself works really well for things like Mythic World First skills, because it kind of allows you to be a strong tank even when you're under geared, allows you to take big hits, and Bloody Case overall have been really strong for fights like Mythic Petite, where they can do more HPS than healers. They fit that fight really well, and having a Blood DK on Mythic Fatigue means like it's going to be a lot easier for you. And you can see at a lot of different information. You can see the charts I'm showing you right now. These are real data. This is real data. This is not just simulated results. And right now I'm showing the tank damage. But if you look at the numbers at the bottom, you'll see how many parses each of these tanks had, and you can see that Death Knights are the most popular, followed by Brewmaster, Monks. And if you go to further boss fights, if you go to Mythic, let's say mid-tracks, you'll notice that it's basically all Monks and Death Knights. And if you go to Mythic Cahoon, so we're talking about like the 1%, the top end raiders in the world, you'll see that there's a lot of Brewmasters, a lot of Bloody, well, to some extent there's a lot of Bloody Case. But overall, you can see that there's so many Bloody Case and Brewmasters, and I really do wonder how Blizzard is going to change this, because I feel a lot of people are negative towards Bloody Case being so strong, because a lot of people will say like, hey, when is the last time the Bloody Case were not OP? A lot of the people who played in Legion, they know that, at least not the start of Legion, but the kind of mid to the end Legion expansion, Bloody Case were mandatory for Mythic Plus. Like, I mean, if you look at the MDI, you'll notice that, okay, there was some sort of, you know, class differentiation between DPS and healers. I mean, among healers it was mainly Druids and Holy Paladins, but for tanks it was only Blood DKs. DKs were extremely popular. So now if you actually go to, let's say, any key in BfA that's been achieved level 15 and up, so we're talking about really high-end Mythic Plus keys, and we look at the tank population, and we look at unique class population, which means that each character will be counted only once, despite how many runs they were in. So that means like how many different groups they were doing Mythic Plus, and how many of those groups were using Blood DKs. You'll notice that the extreme high levels, plus 15s, that 55% of the population were Blood DKs. And I said this at the very start of BfA, when BfA launched like month or whatever, I was looking at these charts, and I was looking at them, and I was saying, wow, there's a lot of Bloody Case. They're kind of climbing. They were starting off like 20%, 30%, and I was like, Blizzard has to do something about this, because this is gonna be Legion again, where Bloody Case were extremely powerful. Even though Bloody Case got nerfed, they're still really strong. They're unique the unique class abilities they bring, Mass Grip and things like that, are amazing. Even though they lost the group leech abilities and things like that, they're still very popular. And you'll notice that if you go to like 10 and up, there's more, you know, there's more different classes who are doing it. But again, Blood Decays are really, really popular overall. Probably the most popular Mythic Plus tank. So besides the tank balance, I'm not sure how they're gonna do it. I'm not sure how they're gonna nerf it, but I definitely see Blood Decays needing a nerf in Mythic Plus. I don't see Brewmasters really needing a nerf in terms of Mythic Plus. Brewmasters are probably the strongest tank in raiding scenarios because, like I mentioned, Stagger is really strong. And for Mythic World First guilds, they'll probably bring there were a lot of top end guilds using 1 or even 2 Brewmasters, because even if they're under gear, they're going into this Mythic First Cahoon where they don't have the best gear. Brewmasters can, and with the Stagger mechanic, can really take heavy punishment, really heavy punishment. So besides that, they also talked about healers. They talked about Resto Shamans in particular. They were talking about Resto Shamans because Resto Shamans were bottom tier in terms of HPS. When BfA came out, they received quite a few buffs, quite a few substantial buffs. They're still at the bottom tier in terms of HPS, but again, HPS does not mean everything. And I even said that in the video, basically saying that for Holy Paladins you have Devotion Aura, which reduces the damage you take for the whole party. It doesn't show up in healing meters. HPS should not be the only metric when you measure healers, and he's right. But I feel a lot of people will be looking at HPS. To some extent, sometimes looking at HPS is a valid reason for a class to be buffed or nerfed. And the specific question was that Restoration Shamans do well when there is stacked up healing, and they do pretty bad when a lot of people are spread, plus Resto Shamans are not very popular in terms of Mythic Plus. And we can see that if we actually go to something like 15 and up and we look at healers, Resto Shamans are really not, there's not a lot of representation here in terms of that. But let's look at rating first. So first of all, Resto Shamans are strong on stack to fights, and there's no more stack to fight than Mythic Vectis or Vectis in general. And you can see on this kind of fight, Resto Shamans actually climbing in terms of HPS. Their healing range can hit basically everybody, or at least, you know, be within everyone's range. So Shamans do really well on Vectis. If you look at every other fight, you'll notice that, like, if you look at Talak, if you look at Mother, if you look at Fatigue, especially Fatigue is one of those fights where it promotes spreading out. So Resto Shamans are probably the least effective on Fatigue, but that's just one fight that really doesn't allow for that. Zekvos is really not. So basically, Shamans, their niche scenario where they do really well on stacked up fights, it's there, but it's not enough. Or at least Ian even said that it's not enough at this point. And they even mentioned to some extent that there might be some new healing spells being added and things like that to make Mythic Plus easier. Or at least Mythic Plus is definitely a big point when looking at Resto Shaman utility, because probably the least favorite healers. Because why would you bring a Resto Shaman in your Mythic 15 or Mythic 12 or whatever when you can have other healer who will have an easier time achieving a key in time? I'm not saying it's impossible or not possible to do really high keys as Resto Shaman, it's just harder. And Blizzard kind of agrees to that situation. And they also mentioned, and you know, when Blizzard mentions specific classes, they're either gonna get nerfed or buffed. And that is basically Discipline Priest. And Discipline Priest in Mythic have been the highest pricing healer. And I mean, they make a valid point. Blizzard makes a valid point when they say that Discipline Priest will provide the most damage out there and provide one of the highest HPS or one of the highest healing in the game. But he also mentioned that there's a high skill ceiling. And what do I mean by high skill ceiling? This is Mythic logs. This is Mythic real data by players achieving really high numbers in terms of healing. Now, if we actually look at the heroic ones, you'll notice that Discipline Priests are actually not the top. And Ian kind of mentioned this because he said that Discipline Priests have a really high skill ceiling. And he's right. Discipline Priest who's not that familiar with the fight, Discipline is all about anticipating damage, knowing the damage patterns. So if you're a Discipline Priest who's not sure about the fight, not sure when to use their, you know, when to prolong their atonements and things like that, when to use their schisms and whatever talent build you're running, if you're not sure about all of that, you probably won't do that well in healing. But when you look at the highest skilled population, and that's usually going to be in Mythic, where people will try to maximize their healing classes, you'll notice that Discipline Priest can put out really good numbers. And if you look at specific fights, for example, if you look at things like Fatigue, you'll notice that Discipline Priests are doing an average 25k HPS. If you go at Zekvos, you'll notice that Discipline Priests are doing on average 22k HPS. If you go to Vectis, which is very healing intensive fight, you notice Discipline Priests are doing 29k HPS, Resto Shamans are doing 26. Holy Priests are doing pretty well as well, so Priests in general are really strong healers right now in Uldir and even Mythic Plus. And if you go to things like Mitrax, which again is a very healing intensive fight on Mythic, you'll notice that huge disparity here. You'll notice that Discipline Priests are doing on average 30k HPS, and then the next different class than the Priest is Mistweavers, who are pulling 26 to 25k HPS. So there is like a 5k differentiation between the next best healer, and that is huge. That is absolutely massive on this specific fight. And it's not like there's only one fight where Discipline is really strong. Discipline is strong on nearly every single fight in Uldir. And again, if you look at Mythic Plus, you'll notice that at the really extremely high keys, Discipline is one of the most popular healer right now. Not only because their healing is pretty good, but also because they can output the most damage, especially if you use Schism and things like that. They can really almost feel like that 50 DPS. Not exactly, but on certain fights and things like that, they can be really strong. So I can see why Blizzard, Ian, and things like that said that Discipline Priest might receive a nerf. We're not sure what kind of nerf they're going to get. I'm not sure whether it's going to be just pure numbers. Maybe they're going to swap out some talents and things like that. I don't think they're going to do anything major because Discipline feels pretty nice to play. It feels rewarding, and I kind of appreciate classes having a high skill ceiling. I like a class like Shadow Priest used to be like that in Legion when they were surrendered to madness, where the exact same thing used to happen, where heroic logs for Shadow Priests were pretty average, like in mid-tier, but if you look at the mythic logs for Shadow Priests, they were dominating, like one of the first best DPS, and like at the very start of Legion. This was after that Shadow surrendered to madness was nerfed like 3 times. So I kind of appreciate a class having a high skill ceiling where if you play a class really well, you can output really good numbers. I wish more classes would be like that. I actually wish every healing class would be like that, but it's not always like that. With this simplification that happened in BfA and to some extent in Legion, to some extent you can watch few guides, you can watch videos, and you can play your healer to nearly maximum potential. There's a lot of, especially reactive type of healers, because reactive type of healers, you see damage and you press buttons and you heal. So that's one of the reasons why Discipline Priests are doing so well, because it's not, you can't really do that. You need to know when damage is coming out. But I feel they're doing a bit too much right now. So the nerf is almost definitely coming. I'm not sure how big it's going to be. Resto Shamans are most likely going to get buffed. Maybe new healing spells, which is going to be really interesting, because Ian mentioned Resto Shamans have always been the stacked up healer and kind of dropping off in terms of when people are spread out, or kind of dropping off in 5-man scenarios where a lot of your, you know, AoE toolkit was never optimized, or you couldn't really optimize your AoE toolkit, and you had to go with the simplified mode rotation, which did not provide that much AoE healing and things like that. So maybe there's going to be some really cool changes. I really would like to hear your opinions about these type of videos, because this is a very different type of video with minimal editing and things like that. This is a discussion video. I want to hear your opinions about this. I want to hear how you feel about this tank balance. I want to hear how you feel about this healer balance. Whether you agree with these classes being overpowered, whether you think these classes deserve nerfs or buffs, or maybe everything's fine, and whether you enjoy BfA overall. I would love to hear your opinions. Thank you for watching this new kind of video, and I'll see you in my next guide.